Welcome to another episode of BHP Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today I had a wonderful discussion with author and deacon Dawit Muluneh. He has written a wonderful book titled Hopeless Romantic, The Untold Story of Ethiopia, and the history is absolutely fascinating. He discusses his writing journey and learning all about the history of Ethiopia. I can't wait for you to meet him. I'm so happy that he's decided to be a member of the book club. Welcome our newest member, Dawit Muluneh. Dawit, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to being a member of the book club. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
You're welcome. I'm excited that you're here because we get to talk about a book that isn't published yet. And I know that you're really passionate about it. I know that you have a book that is published. But before we get into that, I would like to find out your journey to become a writer. You've written two books. Well, the first one's published. The second one isn't. But how did you decide that you were going to even start writing and then actually publish?
Yeah, so that's to tell you that it's telling you about my background and kind of like who I am. So I was born in Ethiopia and came here when I was 7. And I grew up just like, everybody else in America doing what American kids do. And as I started growing up, I started serving at the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. And I kind of fell in love with the church. So undergrad, I became an engineer, and I lived my life. I had a house and did all that. And eventually I decided to give all that up and head over to Ethiopia to live in a monastery for about 1.5 years. And after having learned about the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, I came back to the States and started serving the church through Sunday school services. And as I was engaging with my Sunday school students, that's when I realized that there was a cultural gap between Ethiopia and America. And I decided to write a book for the youth, for my Sunday school students, to help them understand what the church was really about. I have always this idea that I don't like to do something for the sake of doing it. I don't want to write a book because I want to write a book. I want to write a book because there's a need for a book. And at that particular time, there was a need for young Ethiopians in the diaspora to learn more about the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Similarly, this book, I wrote it at a time that I thought people needed to learn more about the history of Ethiopia. I guess we'll get into that a little bit later.
And that is that first book, I Need Answers, correct?
Yeah, the first one was, my target audience was very small. So it was the Ethiopian Orthodox diaspora in America. So it was written for them to help them understand about the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church.
Did you self-publish it?
Yes, I did. Yes.
And so did you just use the Amazon platform or did you search for somebody? What did you do?
I Googled how to publish a book. And I came across a really good company, a Christian editing company. I think that's their full title name. But they were a great group of people, editors, publishers. They put everything for me on Amazon. I just had to come up with the money. But in terms of editing, proofing, book cover, formatting, everything was taken care of. Very expensive, nice, but worth it. Yeah.
And now the book is out there. So now you're working on your second book, Hopeless Romantic, The Untold Story of Ethiopia. And I know that you're really passionate about this book when we first talked. So tell me about this book and where are you in the publishing process?
Yeah, so this book, I'm very, very passionate about it. It was inspired through unfortunate circumstances. So for those who may not know, Ethiopians currently in the midst of a civil war. And this civil war kind of started about 1 year ago, and it broke my heart watching the same Sunday school students that I served for many years being divided across ethnic divisions and religious differences and that sort of thing. So I decided to write a book for that generation. And at the same time, as I was writing, I was learning so much about the history of Ethiopia in my education. I'm currently a Ph.D. student in Ethiopic Studies. And while I was doing that, I learned so many great things about Ethiopia, and I figured I should write a history. And I always say Ethiopia is like the movie Black Panther. And, Ethiopia is our Wakanda because it had a rich history. In terms of where I am in the writing process, today I finished the formatting process. So I'm just waiting to put it live, and that's the only thing I need to do. Hopefully I'm gonna do that in November 9th is the day that I have in mind right now.
So tell me about the book. I mean, the history of Ethiopia must have taken some time to research. What did you find out? Why do you call it Wakanda?
Yeah,
a lot of people don't know.
They don't know. Let me tell you.
Tell us. Tell us so we know.
So, even me as an Ethiopian, haven't been an Ethiopian, I could tell you, I always thought of Ethiopia as a third world country that's poor, that it really doesn't have a lot to offer to the rest of the world. But I started learning that it was one of the greatest empires that ever existed. The 3rd century figure Mani said that the 4 greatest empires in the world were China, Rome, Persia, and Ethiopia. And when you read these type of things, like what did it have to offer that was so rich? I never knew that it was doing trade with great empires like the Byzantine Empire, like India, like Egypt. It was rich enough that it had natural resources such as ivory, which we'll get into later. It had gold. There's a throne made out of marble that incorporated Greek and Ethiopic inscriptions in it. So Ethiopians were writing at a time and had their own alphabets where the rest of the world didn't even know how to read or write. So all these things, to me was an indicator that Ethiopia was way advanced in technology and in the ability to write and the ability to govern. It had women leaders throughout history. I mean, this was really an advanced empire. Ethiopia holds one of the earliest illuminated gospels in the world. People don't know this. So, the more I'm reading about it, the more I'm fascinated about it. Ethiopia had the Ethiopic language had a minor role to play in the formation of the Quran. There were certain words, about 70 or more words that are found in the Quran that hold Ethiopic meaning behind them. So this is really, remarkable if we really think about it. When we think about Ethiopia, we think of this like third world country, but it wasn't. It was really a force to be reckoned with.
So what else did you find out? What happened to Ethiopia?
Yeah, so, throughout history, Ethiopians were very kind. In general, I read about this. I dedicated a full chapter to how they were friendly to the rest of the world. For example, during the rise of Islam, when Muhammad was being persecuted, they sought refuge in Ethiopia, which the Quran also addresses, and Ethiopians accepted a lot of Muslims into their land. Throughout history, it was written that Ethiopians accepted refugees whenever people came to them. And in the Middle East, when in the city of Najran, Christians were being persecuted, Ethiopians sent their army to save the people who were being persecuted during the 6th century under King Caleb. So this is the type of kind of society that existed at the time. Unfortunately, it shows that historical documents show, because of the color of our skin, countries like Egypt, and empires like Rome looked down upon the nation of the Black. For example, Egypt and Ethiopia had a relation through church for several centuries. But if you read early Egyptian spiritual books, I'll give you one example. There's a story about a bishop who, after conducting liturgy, says he was afraid because he saw Black people and white people. And an angel descends and tells him, hey, these white folks, these are the holy people, but the Black people, they have sinned. And if you give them Holy Communion, their image will transform into becoming white. This is written in spiritual books. And Saint Origen, for example, who's a very well-known saint, has written in his commentaries that in the Songs of Solomon, where it talks about I'm Black and beautiful, it says the speaker here is Ethiopian. So of course everybody knows Black is a nebulous metaphor for meaning sin. In the Bible, it's used a lot. But here, it personifies the color to being Ethiopian. So now we have an image of what sin looks like. It looks Ethiopian. And then he goes forward and says, the reason why the speaker is saying I'm beautiful is because she repented and she turned white. So according to the early historians and even church figures, Black was a state to avoid. It wasn't a state to be, but it was a state to resist. You didn't want to stay Black. It was something to resist. So there was always this kind of pressure put on this nation and Africa in general. This is, I think, a story for all of us to share in. But all that kind of changed in the 20th century when the colonizers started coming to Africa to take their natural resources away. Of course, Italy came to Ethiopia to get their ivory as they wanted. But it was Ethiopia who defeated this nation, the Italy, and suddenly this defeat was an embarrassment to Italians. The Black people defeated what they call the civilized nation. In fact, if I may quote something here, in their early 20th century, the Western world had a problem with this. They couldn't accept the nation of Blacks, defeating a civilized nation. So Herbert Vivian and other journalists wrote the following in protest to Ethiopians being proud about this event. And this is a quotation, so just be aware. It says, "It is no doubt reasonable that a nation of niggers possessing 300,000 rivals should take a tone different from that of niggers who are not permitted to possess any, but they go too far when they presume to arrogate to themselves a superiority over civilized countries against which they could not possibly stand up." So here, the Western world had such a problem with the narrative of Black people defeating whites. They had to reduce them to this level and say, you can't be proud. The only reason why you won is because you had guns. This is, it's hard to believe, but it happened.
Wow.
It happened. And in the 1920s, the Italians, they could not take the shame anymore. They had to come back to Ethiopia for a second time to reclaim their name. And this time they came even with bigger guns and bigger power to ensure that Ethiopians would submit to the white man. But before they came in with their guns, they sent their war strategists, people named Carlo Conti Rossini and Enrico Cerulli, to study the people. And this is where my heart breaks. And this is where, this is true. When I was doing my research, I was crying as I read this part of history. And they went into the land and they started to investigate how the people operated. And the idea is you have to divide the people into different pockets of people. And as long as you could get a group of people to fight each other, they will never see the true enemy that's controlling them. It's the old slogan, divide and conquer. So these war strategists decided to study the people according to religion, ethnicity, and language divisions. And they started instructing them to believe. In fact, in some cases, they drew family trees to prove to them that they were different from their neighbor. To prove to them that even though they had the same language, even though they had the same religion, they were different. They had to believe it. And they started to teach these things. And unfortunately, these writings ended up in universities across the world. And these teachings are being taught to this day, even at the university that I'm a part of, as instead of being presented as a war strategy, it's being presented as scholarship, as Ethiopic studies.
Wow. I can see why you're passionate about getting this book out, because the history was just fascinating. And so when you put the book out there, what is it that you hope to accomplish? What is it that you are hoping the book helps?
Very good question. So as I stated a little bit before, this book was inspired because of the civil war that's taking place in Ethiopia at the moment. This is a civil war that BBC, CNN, Fox News are talking about. And I want to shift to the conversation from the civil war that's taking place right now to the earlier periods, so that we can create an awareness of how Ethiopia got to the place that it is today, right? We didn't just arrive here. There was a journey that we took, and sadly, I think the second thing that I want to do is I want to educate people so that we're especially my fellow Ethiopians, because the history of that the war strategists have kind of pumped out into society is seen as the authoritative history of our own narrative. So our history has been stolen from us. It's been taken away from us. It's like someone coming here and telling me who I am. No. You can't tell me who I am. I will tell you who I am. Right. And now the world has told us and defined us who we are. And that has to change. And especially the ethnic feuds that are happening. It's as if Virginia and Californians started fighting each other for different reasons. They're at the end of the day all are American. You could talk about West Coast, East Coast, but at the end of the day, everyone is American here. Of course, there are issues here and issues there, but at the end of the day, when you come down to it, there are certain things that bring us all together. An idea that brings us, that idea is lost in Ethiopia. Also, I talk about this all the time. The idea of Westerners telling Ethiopians what their history is tantamount to Americans going to Mexico to learn about American history. I mean, nowhere does that happen. But unfortunately, we have lost our history, and it's time to get it back. And Ethiopia has such an amazing history that we need to claim it. We need to claim our history.
Yeah, I would agree. Have you thought about how you're going to market the book?
Right now, I'm using social media, and I have a platform as a deacon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So I'm using my platform as well to inform and educate fellow Ethiopians about what I'm writing about.
And you said you had a website. What is the website?
I have a website. The website is my first and last name, DawitMuluneh.com, DawitsMuluneh.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. The book sounds wonderful. When do you hope that the book will drop?
I'm hoping by November 9th, the book will definitely drop by then.
Will be out. So I'm excited. I'll be sure to put the website in the podcast description. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. The history is just absolutely fascinating. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of BHP Book Club. I have been your host, Kelly Morgan. I just wrapped up with author, Deacon Dawit Muluneh as we talked about his book, Hopeless Romantic, The Untold History of Ethiopia. Absolutely fascinating history, and it will make a wonderful read. If you want to promote your book on the book club and become a new member of the book club, all you have to do is just go to my website, www.brightheadedpublishing.com, go to the contact section, drop me a note, we'll connect, and you could be the next author promoting their book on the podcast. I appreciate everyone who listens. Thank you so much. I could not do this without you. Next week, we'll have another author, but until then, as always, keep writing.